Hi, it's Susan. Welcome back to my channel. And if this is the first time you've stopped by, thank you so much for visiting. I hope you will like this video, hit the subscribe button, and maybe join the Facebook group so you can be part of our community. I have a special book to share with you today. This is special to me because I guess I would call it a bit of a celebration. And this book is called Nature's Whisper. And why is it a celebration? Well, because for a long time, I would say probably close to about a year and a half now, I have been struggling with making art and struggling with trying to figure out who I am and where I fit into the art community. And, that age-old question, what do I want to be when I grow up? And I don't know. I was a writer for 30 years. I wrote children's books and was very involved in the publishing world, and that was awesome, and I loved it. And then I turned to art, and then, just kind of experimenting, playing around with art journals and collage and glue books and all that fun stuff, just mess making. But then at the same time, I was building a native garden, a garden for wildlife, a California native plant garden. And my husband and I were talking about it the other night, and it was 3 houses ago that we started. We were renting a little house, and we took over the little side yard and decided that we wanted to experiment with native plants to see if we could create some kind of a pollinator environment. And we were hooked then. And the next house we moved to, when we bought our first house, we tore out the lawn, much to the dismay of all the neighbors, and planted California native plants. And we overplanted. We made all the mistakes that new gardeners make. We put in way too many plants, and we waited for some of them to die because, of course, we didn't plant the right plants in the right area. And it was okay. It was okay because it became this wonderful wonderland of not just plants, but critters. And on either side of our house, we had people that had lived there for 50 years. There used to be almond orchards, and they said back then the almond orchards brought in so many birds and butterflies and bees. And now they were getting the chance to see them, and they were getting the chance to see them again because we had planted all these California native plants. Let me tell you, I was hooked. I was so hooked. So I spent several years taking that little tiny, it was about a 6,000 square foot lot. So we had a huge house on this little tiny piece of property, and I just converted every square inch of it to garden and went absolutely crazy. And like I said, it was really overpacked, but it was wonderful because we learned so much about plants and we learned so much about pollinators. And from there, I was still writing then, and I was writing a lot of poetry about the garden. But then started to see all these birds come into the garden, and I didn't know what they were. I couldn't identify them. I think the only bird I really knew by sight would have been an eagle or a robin, and there weren't a whole lot of eagles coming into my backyard. So what I did was got a camera and started taking pictures and learning how to identify them. And the camera led me a little bit deeper into the art world. At that time, I was just playing with art to kind of, deal with writer's block. I wasn't thinking about art as anything that I wanted to do a lot of. It was the garden. I was sure that I was going to be a gardener, and that was going to be my focus for the rest of my life. So then fast forward to a few more years, and we bought this house out in the country. We traded a little tiny 6,000 square foot lot in the city to half an acre in the country. Half an acre that had no plants on it except for a couple of oak trees. And it was completely devoid of anything green except for weeds. There weren't even any worms. When I tried to dig holes in the ground, there weren't any worms in the ground. And, I fell in love with this piece of property, and I wanted to do something to honor it. And so we started to add the native plants, and we started to do things to try and bring the dead ground that had no worms back to life. And if you've watched any of my videos before, you've heard me tell some of the stories and the joy that the yard that used to have a full-size batting cage in it with RVs and motorcycles being raced all around it now is becoming a flourishing California native garden. And it brings me so much joy. But due to some things that happened in life, I wasn't making art. I wasn't writing books and I wasn't making art. And this last year and a half or so, nothing to do with the COVID. It was kind of hard. I was trying to figure out where I was going. So I started playing again. And that's the heart of everything. When we don't know what to do, how about we play? How about we take a playtime and find out or remind ourselves what it is that brings us joy? And for me, of course, it was the garden. It was the garden that we had built here. And I had to take some time to remember that this was something wonderful to me, that this wasn't an obligation to go out and take care of the garden. It was a joy. Maybe it was a bit of an obligation. I guess I felt like I had an obligation to the critters that were looking for a place to call home. So this last, I guess, month or so, just since the beginning of the year here in 2021, I started to play again, and I started to find joy again in the art and in the garden. And so that's why this book, Nature's Whisper, is a celebration of finding my way back to art because of my garden, because of the things in my garden. This is about 5x7, and it's one of those things that just sort of evolved. I had an idea in my head. I wanted to make an accordion book. That was what I was thinking of to start with. So I just listened to my heart while I was working on these. I listened to the materials. This might look a little bit familiar to some of you that have watched me make my nature clusters before. These are little bits of jute string that I unravel and some little tiny seed beads here. On the cover, it's covered with some tea-dyed paper. Not tea-dyed paper, some tea-dyed fabric. And the little marks in there are just from me putting little bits of metal on there and letting it sit for a few days in the summer sun. This bark is from the privet trees that line one of our property lines, and I just wired it down. This is actually the inside bark. Some acorns from our coast live oak and some lichen, which is dropped all the time. One of the ferns that grows under the deck. And this is some raw mulberry that has been dyed with some of the dyes that I'm making from the plants in my garden. Just a little piece of sari ribbon to tie it closed. And again, some more little pieces of jute. So as I said, this is a celebration. It's a celebration to finding my way back to art, to finding my way back to my kind of art, which maybe I didn't even claim in the past. I wasn't sure that it was mine, but lately I feel like I'm finding my stride again, and that brings me more joy than I know how to even put into words. This is one of my fennel fronds on a tea bag with some little bits of cinnamon sticks and fibers, wool roving, threads that I save. Any of the fabric that's in here is fabric I have dyed myself through various ways. It's just a little collage. All the quotes are from my Nature Quotes Set 1, I believe. A little bit of yarrow. I love yarrow. Some handmade paper, some sari ribbon, some fabric. The pages in the book are 5x7 Strathmore watercolor paper. And again, these have all been colored with dyes that I have been making from the plants in my garden. I've been doing a lot of experimenting with that. Dyes and inks, I guess. Dyes for fabric, inks for paper. You might have seen me do a recent video on using alcohol inks on recycled packaging. So that's what this is. And it makes a little bit of a window that you can see some of the light go through. I just decided to let that page shine on its own, little bead. The hinges here, it's just some more of the same fabric that I used on the cover. This was a piece of grass that I pulled out of the ground, and I just liked the way it looked on the page. And that's sometimes what art is. It's not trying to follow a pattern. It's trying to follow your heart, and I like the way it landed on the page. I didn't think it needed anything else. Some of my rust dyed fabric. I think this is my favorite spread in the whole book. This is some bark that a friend sent to me. Actually, I had 2 friends send me bark. And thank you, Quinette and Terry. It's one of my roots, one of my little nature clusters, you know, and they're just whatever I happen to find around. Little scraps of fabric, fibers, threads, some burlap, a little twig that broke off. I did a video on making this. This was a tea bag with stitched leaves, beads, little quote. And then when you get to the end, you can flip it over and see the other side. I'll go through this again at the end and hold each page up so you can get a better look. This is one of my little spirit sticks that I made. There's a video on that. Some slow stitching, fern. Some more of my yarrow on tea bags. I love yarrow. It gets a bum rap, kind of weedy, but the pollinators love it. Some more little twigs, just, you know, they were on my desk, so I just tied them up and added it. Some dyed fabric, handmade paper. It's the back side of the window, and I just decided to frame the window with some tissue paper that had been dyed. Some more rust fabric, some cheesecloth, little stone tied in the center. And then you're back to the beginning. So what I love about this book is you can stand it up. All right, let's go through and I'll show you a little bit more close up here. So what I've decided is that art doesn't have to be as hard as I was trying to make it. I always try to make things hard, you know, and maybe I make things hard because I'm heading a direction that is not necessarily the direction that's right for me in that moment. I need to quit fighting myself, silence the voices in my head. Boy, that's a hard one, isn't it? But that's what I want to do, is I want to not let myself get stopped by all the things going on in the world around me, and instead just let myself follow my heart, which means following my art, going out into the garden to get inspired, bringing these materials inside, and seeing where they want to go. If I listen to the materials, they will tell me where they want to go, what they want to be. And that in turn will help me figure out where I want to go and what I want to be. Now, I already know what I want to be. I just want to be me. Like that old song says, I just want to be me. And I hope you will just be you. Do art your way, but do art, because I think you're going to find out it brings you joy. This is Nature's Whisper, an artist book. Thank you so much for watching. Bye-bye for now.